The red warning lights bathed Commander Sarah's face in bloody hues as she stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, humanity's last dreadnought. Through the massive viewport, the planet Avalon burned beneath them, its one-screen continents now with orange fire and black smoke. The fleet had arrived 3 days ago, and their plasma bombardment had turned humanity's most prosperous colony into a hellscape. "Status report," Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. The bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, their faces illuminated by the glow of emergency displays showing critical system failures across the ship. Lieutenant turned from his tactical station, sweat beading on his forehead. "Ma'am, we've lost contact with all surface installations. The orbital defense platforms are completely destroyed. We're detecting massive energy signatures from the mothership positioning itself in high orbit." Sarah's jaw tightened as she watched another wave of enemy fighters streak toward the planet's surface. They had come without warning, without demands, without even attempting communication. They had simply arrived and begun the systematic extermination of every human settlement on Avalon. 2 million colonists had called this world home just 72 hours ago. "What about the evacuation ships?" she asked, though she already knew the answer from the grim expression on his face. "The last transport was destroyed 6 hours ago," he reported quietly. "They aren't taking prisoners, Commander. They're not interested in surrender or negotiation. This is complete annihilation." The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of struggling life support systems. Sarah had commanded the Prometheus for 8 years, had fought in dozens of skirmishes along the frontier, but she had never witnessed anything like this. They fought with a cold efficiency that spoke of absolute certainty in their cause. They moved like a species that had decided humanity had no right to exist. Chief Engineer's voice crackled through the comm system. "Commander, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I've managed to restore power to the main engines. The bad news is our quantum drive is fried. We're not jumping anywhere until we find a dock for major repairs." Sarah nodded grimly. The Prometheus was stranded in this system, alone against a fleet that outnumbered them 50-1. Their only advantage was that the enemy seemed focused on the planet below rather than hunting down the single human warship that had managed to escape the initial assault. "Ma'am," called out Ensign Park from the communications station, "I'm picking up something strange. There's a signal coming from the planet's surface. It's weak, but it's definitely human." Sarah moved to Park's station, leaning over to study the readout. "Can you clean it up?" Park's fingers flew over his console, filtering out interference and amplifying the signal. Slowly, a voice emerged from the static, crackling and desperate but unmistakably human. "This is Doctor at the Prometheus Research Facility. Is anyone out there? We've discovered something in the ruins, something they are looking for. They're not just trying to kill us. They're searching for something specific." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Prometheus Research Facility was one of Avalon's most secretive installations, dedicated to studying artifacts left behind by the ancients. The facility was built into a mountain complex on the southern continent, designed to withstand orbital bombardment. "Continue transmission," Sarah ordered. Doctor's voice continued, heavy with exhaustion and fear. "We found a chamber deep in the ruins. The ancients left behind some kind of weapon system, but it's incomplete. They know about it. They're not trying to destroy Avalon. They're trying to claim it. But they need human neural patterns to activate the ancient technology." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They weren't conducting genocide for its own sake. They were harvesting human minds to unlock a weapon that could threaten the entire galaxy. The systematic destruction of the surface wasn't random violence but calculated strategy, designed to drive survivors into underground facilities where they could be captured alive. "How many survivors are with you?" Sarah asked into the comm. 15 scientists and technicians. We're sealed in the lower levels, but they're cutting through our defenses. Maybe 6 hours before they break through. Commander, if you can hear this, you have to stop them from getting this technology. The weapon down here could destroy entire star systems." Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew of 43 men and women. They were all that stood between thee and a weapon that could end human civilization. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a lead blanket. "Options?" she asked her senior staff. Lieutenant pulled up a tactical display showing the planet's surface. "We could attempt a rescue mission, but we'd be flying directly into the heart of their fleet. The Prometheus isn't built for atmospheric combat, and we'd be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. What about a surgical strike? Suggested navigation officer. We could use the ship's main guns to collapse the mountain, bury the facility completely. Along with 15 innocent people, Sarah pointed out, and we'd be gambling that they haven't already extracted what they need. Chief Engineer's voice came through the comm again. Commander, I've been thinking about our quantum drive problem. The core is intact, but the focusing crystals are shattered. However, if we could get our hands on some quantum tech, I might be able to jury-rig a solution. Their ships use a similar principle, but with different crystalline matrices. Sarah studied the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The fleet was massive but spread out, focused on the planet rather than defending against a single human ship. Most of their vessels were troop transports and atmospheric fighters. Their heavier warships were in high orbit, confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage. There, she said, pointing to a smaller vessel on the edge of the formation. Light cruiser, probably a command ship coordinating the surface assault. It's isolated from the main fleet. Frowned, ma'am, even a light cruiser outguns us significantly, and if we attack it, we'll draw the attention of their entire fleet. Not if we're smart about it, Sarah replied, her tactical training taking over. How long would you need to strip quantum crystals from a ship? Assuming their technology is compatible, maybe 20 minutes if I had a full EVA team. And how long to reach that cruiser if we use minimal engine output to avoid detection? Navigation officer ran quick calculations. 2 hours, maybe less if we use the planet's gravity well to slingshot around the dark side. Sarah made her decision. We're going to board that cruiser, strip it of anything useful, and use its own technology to repair our quantum drive. Then we're going down to that research facility to extract Doctor and her team, along with whatever ancient technology they've found. The bridge crew exchanged glances. It was an impossible plan that relied on a dozen variables going exactly right. But they were already in an impossible situation, and doing nothing meant watching them acquire a weapon that could end humanity. One more thing, Sarah added. We're going to make those alien bastards pay for what they've done to Avalon. Every transport they destroyed, every colonist they murdered. They came here thinking humans were easy prey. Time to teach them otherwise. Lieutenant straightened in his chair. Orders, Commander. Set course for intercept with that cruiser. Silent running, minimal emissions. Get me a full EVA team suited up and ready for hostile boarding action. And someone find me everything we know about ancient technology and neural interfaces. As the Prometheus began its slow, stealthy approach toward the enemy vessel, Sarah watched Avalon burning below them. The red sky reflected in her eyes, transforming her expression into something fierce and determined. They had made a critical mistake. They had assumed that cornering humanity would make them easier to defeat. They were about to learn that cornered humans were the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The ship moved silently through space, its hull dark against the star field, approaching the unsuspecting cruiser. In the research facility far below, Doctor and her team worked frantically to understand the ancient weapon before their defenses failed. And somewhere in the vast network of underground tunnels, soldiers advanced methodically toward their prize, unaware that humanity's last dreadnought was preparing to remind them why humans had earned their place among the stars. The red sky of Avalon would soon be painted with the fire of human defiance, and they would learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute refusal to surrender when everything they loved was threatened. The rise through the crimson sky was about to begin, and it would be written in the blood of humanity's enemies. The light cruiser Void Render hung in space like a predatory insect, its sleek black hull bristling with weapon ports and sensor arrays. Commander Sarah watched it through the Prometheus's forward cameras as her ship drifted silently through Avalon's shadow, using the planet's bulk to mask their approach. The alien vessel was 3 kilometers long, roughly half the size of her dreadnought, but packed with advanced technology that made it a formidable opponent. Range 800 kilometers and closing, whispered navigation officer. Still no sign they've detected us. Sarah nodded, studying the tactical readout. The cruiser was maintaining a stationary position, coordinating the ground assault through tight beam communications with the surface forces. Its attention was focused downward, toward the planet where their troops were systematically hunting the remaining human survivors. EVA team ready, Commander, reported Lieutenant. Sergeant has 20 Marines suited up for hostile boarding action. Chief is with them, along with his best technicians. Through the ship's internal cameras, Sarah could see the boarding team assembled in the main airlock. They wore the latest generation of combat EVA suits, equipped with magnetic boots, maneuvering thrusters, and enough firepower to cut through armor. Chief carried specialized tools for stripping quantum crystals, while Sergeant's Marines were armed with plasma rifles and breaching charges. "Remember," Sarah said into the comm, "we need that ship's quantum drive intact. No explosives near the engine compartments. Get in fast, neutralize the crew, and strip everything useful. You have 20 minutes before their fleet notices something's wrong." In the depths of Avalon, Doctor pressed her face against the reinforced window of the research facility's observation deck, watching soldiers advance through the underground tunnels. The aliens moved with mechanical precision, their segmented armor gleaming under the facility's emergency lighting. They carried weapons that hummed with contained energy, designed to incapacitate rather than kill. "How much longer?" she asked Dr. James Wright, who was hunched over a console displaying incomprehensible ancient symbols. "The translation matrix is almost complete," Wright replied without looking up. "The ancients built this weapon to respond to human neural patterns specifically. It's like they knew we'd find it eventually." Doctor turned back to study the massive chamber they had discovered buried beneath the facility. The walls were covered in crystalline formations that pulsed with inner light, surrounding a central platform that rose from the floor like an altar. Ancient technology hummed throughout the space, powered by some unknown energy source that had remained active for. "They must have found records of this place in other ancient ruins," she said. "That's why they came here, not for the planet, not for our colonies, but for this weapon." Dr. Wright finally looked up from his console, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. "I've been analyzing the power signatures. This thing isn't just a weapon. It's a reality manipulator. The ancients built it to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in localized space. In the wrong hands, it could unravel the fabric of spacetime itself." The implications sent a chill through Doctor. No wonder they were willing to commit genocide to claim it. With technology like this, they could reshape the galaxy according to their will, eliminating entire species with a thought. "Can we activate it?" she asked. "Use it against them?" "That's what I've been working on," Wright replied. "The control interface requires a human neural link, but it's not just about brain patterns. It needs someone with specific genetic markers, ancient DNA sequences that have been dormant in human genetics for millions of years." Above Avalon's atmosphere, the Prometheus closed to within 50 kilometers of the cruiser. Sarah could now see details of the alien vessel's hull, covered in organic curves that suggested biotechnology rather than pure mechanical engineering. They had evolved in a different direction from humans, developing ships that were grown rather than built. "Launching boarding pods in 3, 2, 1, mark," announced Lieutenant. 4 small craft detached from the Prometheus, too small to register on the cruiser's sensors. They accelerated rapidly toward the alien ship, their stealth coatings and minimal emissions keeping them invisible against the star field. Sarah watched their progress on the tactical display, knowing that the next few minutes would determine humanity's fate. The lead boarding pod, carrying Sergeant and 8 Marines, struck the hull near what sensors indicated was the primary airlock. Magnetic clamps secured it in place while cutting torches began burning through the alien metal. The other 3 pods landed at strategic points, ready to breach simultaneously. "Breaching now," his voice crackled through the comm. "Holy hell, Commander, these walls are thick. Hull composition is like nothing we've seen before." Inside the alien ship, emergency lights began flashing as atmospheric sensors detected the hull breaches. Crew members rushed toward the breach points, their movements fluid, and they communicated through subsonic frequencies that human equipment could barely detect, coordinating their defense with eerie efficiency. The first human Marines burst through the hull breach into a corridor that seemed more like the interior of a living organism than a starship. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and the air itself seemed to move with purpose. Sergeant led his team forward, plasma rifle raised, following Chief toward the engine compartments. "Contact!" shouted Private Williams as soldiers appeared around a bend in the corridor. The aliens moved like liquid mercury, their segmented armor allowing them to contort into impossible positions. They fired weapons that discharged crackling energy bolts, forcing the Marines to take cover behind bulkheads that curved organically rather than meeting at right angles. The firefight echoed through the ship's living corridors as both sides sought advantage. Soldiers could move along the walls and ceiling as easily as the floor, while human Marines relied on superior firepower and tactical training. Plasma bolts scored the organic walls, causing them to bleed a luminescent fluid that pooled on the deck. "How much farther to engineering?" called out between bursts of gunfire. "According to the schematics, maybe 50 meters, the chief replied. "But these corridors don't match any normal ship design. It's like the whole vessel is one giant organism." In the research facility below, Doctor heard the sound of cutting tools echoing through the tunnels. They had reached the final barrier between them and the ancient chamber. She turned to Dr. Wright, who was still working frantically at the control console. "James, they're almost through. Do we have anything?" Wright's hands flew over the ancient interface, which responded to his touch with cascading patterns of light. "I think so. The genetic markers I mentioned, you have them. Your DNA contains dormant ancient sequences. You could potentially activate the weapon." Doctor stared at him in shock. "What are you talking about? How is that possible?" "The ancients didn't just disappear," Wright explained rapidly. "They seeded their genetic material throughout the galaxy, waiting for species to evolve that could inherit their legacy. Humans are their chosen successors. That's why this weapon responds to us." The sound of metal being torn apart echoed from the tunnels above. They had breached the final door and were advancing toward the chamber. Doctor could hear their subsonic communications growing stronger as they approached. Aboard the cruiser, Chief finally reached the engineering section with 3 Marines as escorts. The engine room was a cathedral of living technology, with quantum drive components that pulsed like a massive heart. Crystalline structures grew from the walls and ceiling, channeling exotic energies through organic conduits. "Beautiful," whispered, then got to work. "And completely incompatible with our systems. I need to find the quantum-focusing crystals, but everything here is integrated into the ship's biological matrix." The Marine escort took defensive positions as more soldiers approached. The aliens seemed reluctant to use heavy weapons in their own engine room, giving the humans a tactical advantage. But time was running out. Soon the cruiser's communication with the main fleet would be noticed as missing. "There," said, pointing to a cluster of crystal formations near the central drive core. "Those are the crystals we need, but they're hardwired into the ship's nervous system. Removing them might kill the vessel entirely." "Do it," ordered over the comm. "We need those crystals." Began cutting into the biological conduits with surgical precision. The ship around them shuddered as vital systems began failing. Emergency alarms wailed in subsonic frequencies that made the humans' teeth ache. The cruiser was dying, but it was also becoming desperate. In the ancient chamber, Doctor approached the central platform as Dr. Wright continued his frantic translations. The crystalline walls pulsed brighter as she drew near, responding to her genetic markers. The weapon was awakening after millions of years of dormancy. "You need to place your hands on the control matrix," Wright called out. "But be warned. Once you activate this, there's no turning back. The weapon will bond with your neural patterns permanently." Soldiers burst into the chamber, their weapons raised. But they stopped abruptly when they saw the platform beginning to glow. Their subsonic communications became frantic as they realized the humans had found a way to activate the ancient technology. Doctor looked back at the approaching aliens, then at Dr. Wright, who nodded encouragingly. She placed her hands on the crystalline surface of the control matrix, and reality exploded around her in waves of impossible color and sensation. Above the planet, the Prometheus detected massive energy spikes coming from the surface. Something ancient and powerful was awakening in the depths of Avalon, and Sarah realized that the battle was about to become something far beyond conventional warfare. The red sky began to change, shot through with veins of silver light that pulsed in rhythm with Doctor's heartbeat. The rise through the crimson sky was accelerating, and humanity was about to claim an inheritance that had been waiting for them since the dawn of time. Doctor screamed as ancient knowledge flooded her mind like molten metal. The crystalline control matrix beneath her hands blazed with silver fire, and suddenly she could perceive reality on levels that human consciousness was never meant to comprehend. She saw the fundamental structure of space and time, the quantum threads that held the universe together, and more terrifyingly, she understood how to manipulate them. The chamber around her transformed as the ancient weapon system came fully online. The walls shifted from crystalline formations to flowing patterns of pure energy, while the floor beneath her feet became transparent, revealing the planet's core burning far below. Dr. Wright staggered backward as waves of power washed over him, his instruments overloading and sparking. The soldiers who had burst into the chamber froze as the reality around them began to change. Their advanced armor detected impossible energy readings, and their subsonic communications became panicked chirps of alarm. One of them raised his weapon toward Doctor, but the plasma bolt simply dissolved as it entered the field of distorted spacetime surrounding the control platform. Dr. Wright shouted over the growing harmonic resonance filling the chamber. "Can you hear me?" Doctor turned toward him, and Wright gasped at what he saw. Her eyes now glowed with the same silver light as the ancient technology, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "I can hear everything, James," she said, her words echoing with impossible depth. "The entire galaxy is singing, and now I know the song." Above the planet's surface, the Prometheus shuddered as gravitational waves rippled outward from Avalon's core. Commander Sarah gripped the bridge railing as her ship's sensors registered readings that shouldn't have been possible. Space itself was being rewritten in the vicinity of the research facility. "Ma'am," called out Lieutenant, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "The fleet is reacting to whatever's happening down there. Their formations are breaking apart. Some of their ships are actually retreating." Sarah studied the tactical display with growing amazement. The alien fleet that had been methodically destroying Avalon's surface was now in complete disarray. Entire squadrons of vessels were pulling back to safe distances, while others seemed to be having difficulty maintaining stable flight paths. "Status on the boarding operation?" she asked. "Sergeant's team has secured the quantum crystals," reported. "But Chief says the ship is dying. Whatever those crystals were connected to, removing them has caused a cascade failure throughout the vessel." Sarah could see the alien cruiser they had boarded beginning to list as its organic systems shut down. Parts of its hull were already darkening as the biotechnology that kept it alive started to fail. But more importantly, the energy signatures coming from the planet's surface were growing stronger by the minute. Aboard the dying cruiser, Sergeant led his Marines and Chief through corridors that were now convulsing like the inside of a dying animal. The bioluminescent patterns in the walls flickered erratically, and the air itself had become thick and difficult to breathe. "Move it, people," shouted as sections of the ceiling began to collapse behind them. "This whole ship is coming apart." Chief clutched the salvaged quantum crystals against his chest, their alien geometry humming with contained energy. "These power sources are incredible," he said as they ran. "If I can integrate them with our quantum drive, we'll have more than enough power to reach any system in the galaxy." The Marines reached their extraction point just as the ship's artificial gravity failed completely. They activated their EVA suit thrusters and launched themselves back toward the Prometheus, racing against time as the vessel broke apart around them. In the ancient chamber, Doctor raised her hands from the control matrix, but the connection remained. Silver energy flowed from her fingers like liquid starlight, reshaping the very structure of reality around her. The soldiers in the chamber watched in terror as their weapons began to dissolve, their molecular bonds unraveling under the influence of ancient technology. "The weapon isn't just a tool of destruction," Doctor said, her voice now carrying the weight of cosmic understanding. "It's a key to evolution itself. The ancients built it to accelerate the development of younger species, to guide them toward transcendence." Dr. Wright backed against the chamber wall as the energy field expanded. "You need to be careful. That much power could tear the planet apart." "No," she replied, silver light dancing around her like living aurora. "The power is controlled by will and wisdom. The ancients designed it to respond only to species that had developed sufficient moral complexity. That's why they needed human neural patterns. They lacked the ethical framework to safely wield this technology." Outside the chamber, the ground forces were experiencing catastrophic equipment failures. Their biotechnology, so precisely engineered for warfare, began malfunctioning as ancient energy waves washed over the planet's surface. Weapons became inert, armor systems shut down, and their organic transports fell from the sky like dying insects. Commander Sarah watched through the Prometheus's sensors as the tide of battle reversed completely. Troops that had been advancing through Avalon's underground tunnel systems suddenly found themselves defenseless, their technology neutered by forces they couldn't understand. Human survivors began emerging from hiding places, picking up abandoned alien weapons that no longer functioned. "Ma'am," Lieutenant said with wonder in his voice, "we're receiving communications from survivor groups across the planet. The assault has completely collapsed. Their troops are retreating to their ships, but most of their equipment is non-functional." Sarah felt a surge of hope mixed with caution. Whatever Doctor had activated in that ancient facility was clearly beyond anything humanity had encountered before. But power of that magnitude could be as dangerous to friends as to enemies. "Get me a direct line to Doctor," she ordered. "I need to know what we're dealing with." The communication link established, crackling with interference from the energy fields surrounding the research facility. When Doctor's voice came through, it carried harmonics that made the bridge speakers vibrate. "Commander," she said, "I can perceive your ship's location. The ancient weapon is fully activated and I have control over its functions. But there's something you need to understand. They didn't come here on their own initiative." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. "What do you mean?" "They were sent by something older and far more dangerous," Doctor explained. "The ancients left this galaxy because they were fleeing from an enemy that exists outside normal spacetime. The Devourers. They consume entire realities, leaving nothing but void in their wake." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. If there were servants of these Devourers, then humanity had stumbled into a conflict that spanned eons and threatened the very existence of the universe. "The ancient weapon was meant to be a final defense," Doctor continued. "A way to seal the rifts between realities and prevent the Devourers from entering our space. But it requires a vast network of similar installations throughout the galaxy. Avalon is just one node in a defense grid that has been dormant for millions of years." Chief's voice crackled through the comm from the engineering deck. "Commander, I've successfully integrated the quantum crystals with our drive system. We now have enough power to make hyperspace jumps across galactic distances." Sarah made a decision that would reshape humanity's destiny. "Doctor, can you transfer the ancient knowledge to our ship's computers? We need to find the other installations and complete the defense grid." "I can do more than that," Doctor replied. "I can come with you. The weapon has bonded with my neural patterns permanently. I am now both human and ancient, capable of activating any installation we find." As if responding to her words, silver light began to rise from Avalon's surface, piercing the crimson sky like a beacon. The energy reached beyond the planet's atmosphere, creating a pillar of radiance that extended into deep space. Other lights began to answer from distant star systems, as ancient installations throughout the galaxy responded to the awakening signal. The fleet, what remained of it, began a hasty retreat toward the edge of the system. Their biotechnology was incompatible with ancient energy fields, and staying near Avalon would mean certain death for their organic ships. But as they fled, their subsonic communications carried a message back to their hidden masters beyond the galaxy's rim. The Devourers would know that the ancient defense network was awakening. They would come in force, bringing technologies and horrors that could unmake reality itself. Humanity had won this battle, but they had also announced their presence to enemies that had destroyed civilizations older than Earth's solar system. Commander Sarah stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the silver pillar of light rise from Avalon's surface. The red sky was now shot through with veins of ancient power, and she realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer just fighting for survival. They had become the inheritors of a cosmic responsibility that would determine the fate of existence itself. "Set course for the nearest ancient installation," she ordered, "and prepare for quantum jump. We have a galaxy to save." The Prometheus turned away from burning Avalon, its hull now crackling with hybrid human-ancient technology. Doctor materialized on the bridge in a column of silver light, her transformation complete. She was still human, but she was also something more, carrying within her mind the accumulated knowledge of a species that had fought the darkness between realities. The rise through the crimson sky had begun in earnest, and humanity was ascending to take their place as guardians of the galaxy. But in the void between stars, ancient enemies were stirring, preparing to test whether the inheritors of Earth were worthy of the burden they had claimed. 3 months after the awakening of Avalon, the UES Prometheus emerged from quantum space near the nebula, where ancient sensor arrays had detected another dormant installation. Doctor stood on the bridge, her transformed appearance now familiar to the crew. Silver light still flowed beneath her skin like living circuitry, and her eyes held depths that seemed to reflect starlight from galaxies beyond counting. "The installation is on the third planet," she announced, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the ship's hull. "It's been dormant for 3 million years, but the awakening signal from Avalon has begun to stir its systems." Commander Sarah studied the tactical display with concern. In the months since leaving Avalon, they had activated 17 ancient installations across the galaxy, each one adding to the growing defense network. But they weren't alone in their mission. Dark shapes had been spotted at the edges of sensor range, following them from system to system. "Pursuit vessels," reported Lieutenant from the tactical station. "Still maintaining their distance, but they're definitely tracking our movements." Sarah nodded grimly. The aliens had been shadowing them for weeks, never attacking but never leaving. It was becoming clear that they were gathering intelligence, learning about the ancient installations before reporting back to their mysterious masters. "Doctor," Sarah said, "how much longer until the defense grid is complete?" The transformed scientist closed her eyes, her consciousness extending through quantum space to touch the awakened installations. "We need at least 50 more nodes to create a stable barrier. But, Commander, I'm detecting something else. The Devourers are already testing the outer edges of our reality, small incursions probing for weaknesses." The implications sent a chill through the bridge crew. They had been racing against time to complete the ancient defense network, but their enemies were already beginning their assault on existence itself. As the Prometheus approached the third planet, its sensors revealed a world that had once been verdant, but was now a crystalline wasteland. Ancient towers rose from the surface like frozen lightning, their surfaces covered in the same silver patterns that flowed through Doctor's transformed body. "The installation is underground," she explained. "The ancients built it into the planet's core, drawing power from quantum fluctuations in the planetary magnetic field. But activating it will require a direct neural link, and the connection will be more intense than anything we've encountered before." Chief's voice crackled through the comm from engineering. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy buildups in the pursuit ships. They're preparing to make their move." As if summoned by his words, the alien vessels dropped their stealth fields and accelerated toward the Prometheus. There were 12 of them, sleek predators designed for speed and firepower. But their biotechnology had been modified since the encounter at Avalon, hardened against ancient energy fields. "Battle stations," Sarah ordered. "All hands prepare for combat." The bridge transformed into a hive of activity as the crew prepared for battle. The Prometheus had been upgraded with technology salvaged from multiple species, creating a hybrid vessel that was uniquely human in its adaptability. Quantum crystals powered ancient energy weapons, while human ingenuity had found ways to integrate systems that should have been incompatible. The first attack came in the form of reality distortion torpedoes, weapons that warped spacetime around their targets. The Prometheus's shields flared as the exotic munitions struck, but Chief's modifications held. The ship's hybrid defenses converted the distortion energy into power for their own weapon systems. "Return fire," Sarah commanded. The Prometheus's main guns unleashed streams of silver fire that tore through shields like paper. The ancient weapons didn't just destroy matter, they unraveled the fundamental forces that held enemy ships together. 2 vessels simply ceased to exist, their atoms scattered across multiple dimensions. But the remaining alien ships adapted quickly, their organic hulls reshaping themselves to deflect the energy beams. They swarmed around the Prometheus like angry insects, their modified biotechnology allowing them to phase in and out of normal space. "They're learning," Lieutenant reported grimly. "Their tactics are evolving in real time." Doctor stepped forward, silver light beginning to emanate from her body. "Commander, I need to reach the planet's surface. The installation must be activated before the Devourers can establish a foothold in this reality." Sarah watched the tactical display as more ships appeared at the edge of the system. They were being reinforced, and soon the Prometheus would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Take a shuttle, she decided. Lieutenant, escort Doctor to the surface and protect her while she activates the installation. The rest of us will hold them here. As the shuttle launched from the Prometheus's bay, the battle in space intensified. Vessels phased in and out of reality, their attacks becoming more coordinated and devastating. But the human crew fought with the desperate determination of a species that had learned to thrive in impossible circumstances. Chief rerouted power from life support to weapons, accepting the risk of system failures in exchange for more firepower. Navigation officer performed maneuvers that pushed the ship beyond its design limits, using the planet's gravity well to slingshot around attack formations. On the planet's surface, Doctor and Lieutenant descended into crystalline caverns that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The ancient installation was a marvel of impossible architecture, with corridors that folded back on themselves and chambers that were larger inside than outside. The control matrix is at the center, Doctor said, her transformed senses navigating the non-Euclidean geometry. But the path is guarded by security systems that respond only to ancient genetic markers. As they moved deeper into the installation, crystalline guardians emerged from the walls. They were constructs of living light, programmed to defend the facility against unauthorized intrusion. But when they scanned Doctor, they recognized her transformed DNA and stepped aside. The control chamber was a sphere of pure crystal suspended in a void that seemed to extend forever. Doctor approached the central matrix, her hands already beginning to glow with sympathetic energy. But as she prepared to make the neural connection, alarms began sounding throughout the installation. "What's happening?" Lieutenant asked, raising his weapon as shadows began moving in the crystalline walls. "The Devourers," Doctor whispered, her face pale with terror. "They're breaking through, a small incursion but enough to disrupt the installation." Reality began to tear like fabric around them. Through the growing rifts, they could see glimpses of the space between universes, where things that had never known existence writhed in endless hunger. The Devourers were not physical beings, but conceptual entities that consumed the very idea of existence. Doctor pressed her hands against the control matrix, screaming as ancient knowledge flooded her consciousness. The installation fought to come online, but the Devourer's presence was corrupting the quantum fields that powered the system. Above the planet, Commander Sarah watched in horror as space itself began to unravel around several points in the system. The ships, despite their modifications, were being consumed by the expanding voids. Their organic hulls dissolved as the concept of matter ceased to exist in those regions. She shouted into the comm, "Can you reroute power to Doctor's location?" "Already on it," the chief replied. "But whatever's happening down there is drawing more energy than our entire reactor output." In the installation's control chamber, Doctor felt her consciousness expanding beyond human limits. She was becoming something more than just a bridge between human and ancient technology. The defense network required a living consciousness to coordinate its functions across galactic distances, and she was transforming into that central intelligence. The lieutenant called out as her body began to dissolve into pure energy. "Fight it! Don't let it consume you completely." But Doctor smiled, her form already becoming translucent. "I'm not being consumed, I'm evolving. This is what the ancients planned. A fusion of human determination and ancient knowledge, creating something capable of protecting reality itself." The installation activated with a pulse that rippled across dimensions. The rifts torn by the Devourers began to seal, and the expanding voids collapsed back into normal space. Throughout the galaxy, ancient installations responded to the activation signal, their combined power creating a barrier that existence itself could not penetrate. The fleet, what remained of it, began a hasty retreat as their ships were overwhelmed by ancient energy fields. Their biotechnology was incompatible with the defense network, and staying within its influence meant certain destruction. Commander Sarah felt the Prometheus shudder as waves of stabilizing energy washed over the ship. On the tactical display, she watched the last of the Devourer's incursions collapse, reality healing itself like a wound closing. "Status report," she called out. "All vessels have withdrawn beyond sensor range," Lieutenant reported from the surface. "The ancient installation is fully operational, and the defense grid coverage of this sector is now complete." Sarah looked out at the transformed space around them. Where reality had been torn, new stars now blazed with silver light, born from the intersection of ancient technology and human will. The defense network wasn't just protecting existence, it was enhancing it, creating new possibilities for life and consciousness to flourish. Doctor's voice came through the calm, but it now seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. The immediate threat has been neutralized, Commander, but this is only the beginning. The Devourers will return with greater force, and we must be ready. What do you need from us? Sarah asked. Continue activating installations, came the reply. Each new node makes the network stronger, and Commander, begin recruiting other species. Humanity cannot guard the galaxy alone. We need allies who share our determination to preserve existence. As the Prometheus prepared to leave the system, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate battle over burning Avalon. Humanity had risen through the crimson sky to become something unprecedented in galactic history. They were no longer just survivors struggling for their place among the stars. They had become the guardians of reality itself. The ship jumped to quantum space, carrying its hybrid crew toward the next ancient installation. Behind them, the nebula blazed with new light as the defense network continued its expansion. And somewhere in the space between realities, ancient enemies prepared for a war that would determine whether existence itself would endure or be consumed by the endless hunger of the void. But humanity had proven something important in their rise from a single burning world to galactic guardians. When faced with impossible odds and existential threats, they didn't just survive. They evolved, they adapted, and they found ways to transform weakness into strength. The crimson sky of Avalon had been just the beginning. Now the entire galaxy burned with the silver fire of human defiance, and the Devourers would learn what other ancient enemies had discovered before them. Cornered humans were the most dangerous force in any reality, and they had just claimed responsibility for protecting all of existence. The rise was complete, but the real war was about to begin.